Now it's time to remove all of these items off of the cowl. I don't really need them for the new build, so they're just kind of a waste of space. But you could probably tell I'm not destroying anything to get it off. I'm trying to take it off as neat as possible. I think the only thing I've destroyed on this whole build was that shift linkage, and that's because I didn't want to deal with that nightmare. But all of these items, just because I don't need them, doesn't mean that someone else doesn't. When it comes down to the rubber hoses on the heater core, your best bet is just to slice them off with a blade. These hoses have been on there since '91. They're pretty much bonded to the metal. So just get a razor blade, cut them off, because if you try to use the traditional means of twisting them off with a set of pliers, you're going to end up crushing the ports on that heater core. I also want to remove all of the electrical components to just have as much space as possible. Unfortunately, you can see this harness, it goes into the front bumper for the horn and the turn signals. So let's just go ahead and tear off the front bumper right now. It's not that big of a deal. It needs to come off anyway, and it'll just make my life a lot easier. Now, just so that we're clear, this engine is going to go in a CRX today just for mock-up, meaning it's going to come right back out again. I need to figure out things like how to redo my brake lines, how to run my fuel lines, and in order to get all of that set, I need to have the engine in its place so I can see what I have to work with or what I have to work around. I hope all of that makes sense. So if you see me doing something a little odd, don't worry about it, because the engine is going to come right back out again. With the bumper and the radiator support off of the car, it's so much easier to get into the engine bay. Guys, I'm short. It was a struggle for me to climb over this thing every single time. And here goes that brake line that originally went bad, and it's the reason why the previous owner had to run his own line. So let's just go ahead and take apart whatever we have to take apart to get this broken line out of here. The rest of it, I'm going to leave it alone, but that one broken line just hanging out there has been eating at me. And as you can see, I finally got it out. I did have to cut it because the way it's designed, it was almost impossible to get out in one piece. Based off of other YouTube videos that I've seen, you have to grab this whole proportioning valve and push it against the cowl, how I'm trying to do here. This thing is surprisingly difficult to move, by the way. A lot of people do this and they get away with it. It's so that they don't have to make brake lines, and some people just like zip tie it out of the way, and it'll work. It clears. Trust me, I've seen a lot of people do it, but I don't want to do that. I'd rather just take the difficult route, and at least I have it done the way I want it done. Even if it means a ton of extra time and labor in making new brake lines, then so be it. And now it's time to get this engine mount out of the way. If you're putting a K-series in a CRX, you have to remove this mount. It completely interferes with the engine. So the nice way of doing this is drilling it out and taking your time and all that stuff. And I try to come at it with the calm, civil approach manner, right? And at some point, you gotta just throw all that crap out the window and go straight up caveman on this thing. So I had to pull out the air hammer. And you guys already know, whenever the air hammer comes out, shit's about to get wild, right? So it'll get the job done real fast, but what did it cost, right? There's always a downside. There's always a sacrifice. And yeah, I caused some damage to the rail. So we'll see in just a minute here. And there we have it. There's the damage that caused to the rail. It's pretty much a hole right in it, guys. It's not that big of a deal because right on the lower section of this rail, look at the holes down here from rust. So I already have to fix this rail. There's a good amount of stuff here, and if we look from the bottom, you can see another bigger hole right down there. So a lot of repairs have to be done on this rail. So me adding one more hole up top is not a big deal. I'm just gonna go ahead, cut out the bad spot, and I'll weld in a new pad and make it look good as new. Next, let's go ahead and clean up this rail just a little bit, guys. Like I said, this is mock-up. All the stuff's coming right back out again, so there's no reason to go crazy with cleaning. I'm going to be using Hasport's EFK2 kit. You can see the first two parts, they're like a powder coated or a matte black finish, whereas the third one has a glossy finish, and that's because I painted it myself. This thing comes unpainted because they expect you to weld it in. So you know what, instead of telling you guys, I'm just gonna go ahead and show you when I painted this thing. I actually did this when I lived back at the old house a few months ago. So yeah, I've been holding on to this footage for quite some time now, waiting to show you guys. But you can see it already has some surface rust right out the box, and it's why it's important. I saw at least one other CRX where they didn't fully paint this part, and after a few years this thing started to rust from the inside out on their car, and it would take a ton of work to actually peel it off, you know, cut all the welds and do it right. So I figured, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and paint this right the first time, fully paint it inside and out, and wherever I'm gonna weld it, I'll just go ahead and grind off that paint in that specific area. I hope all that makes sense. I think that's the better approach rather than welding it onto the car as bare metal and then painting whatever you could reach. I don't think that's a good idea if you ask me. And the final step is a clear coat. Now if I remember correctly, it got 2 coats of everything. So 2 coats of self-etching primer, base coat, and 2 coats of clear. And here was the final product after like 2 days of curing. You can see there's like little specks of dirt and dust that landed in the clear coat. Not that big of a deal. It still looks pretty nice. Guys, do you see the stupid crap I'm doing with the tape? Why? Oh, because I don't want to scratch my nice shiny part. It just eats at me so much. Look, I even put tape underneath the bolts before I clamped them. People keep asking me if I'm going to paint the whole engine bay, paint the whole car, go the full 9 yards. And this is why I don't want to do this. I want to make the car look decent, but not go crazy with it, because I kind of like that it's rough around the edges. I don't want to be scared to drive the car in fear of, oh, what if someone puts a dent on it? What if I get a scratch on it? I don't want that for this car. I want to be able to just drive in and enjoy the car and not worry about little scratches and crap like that. You guys are probably thinking, hey, I saw what you did there. Hey, what? I gave you something to look at while I was ranting. You're welcome. Here's my transmission. It's a K20 Z3 out of a 2007 Civic Si. So yes, it's a 6-speed manual with the LSD. Ooh, this gonna be good. So I'm super glad I bought this like 2 or 3 years ago, because it was expensive when I bought it, but right now the prices of these things have just skyrocketed. So I'm just really glad I bought it when I did. And it's been sitting for a while, so I'm just running a tap and die over everything, and so far everything's checking out, and of course blowing it all out with some compressed air. And don't be alarmed by me using an impact gun to put these nuts and bolts on. Everything is just snug. Remember guys, it's all coming back out again. I removed the throttle bearing and the fork because it's all garbage and it's getting replaced anyway. Look at that. And I wondered why my back was hurting me that night. So I'm going to go ahead and put the transmission on my floor jack and use it to kind of lift up the transmission a little bit and help me get this thing installed. This thing was a complete nightmare, just as I expected. And the struggle is real, so I'm going to go ahead and speed up all of this and not waste your time. At one point you're going to see me put 2 bolts in the top, and guys, I'm not using the bolts to pull in the transmission. That is a bad idea. That's how you damage or break things. I really did just keep on trying until the transmission went in all by itself, and the bolts were just there to prevent the transmission from falling off of the engine. I had nowhere to put the old engine, so I just tried setting it on the ground, and surprisingly it was pretty stable. I thought it would want to tip over, but nope, it stands up just fine. Quick question, what do you think I should do with this engine? I have an urge to rebuild it, not like in a performance aspect, but more like just tear it all apart, all new gaskets. I don't really have a use for it, and it's an old engine for an old car, so I don't know who would really need this. I fear it might just be a waste of money. So what do you think? this is the point where I realized something isn't right. The engine is leaning too far back. I thought I should fix it, do something about it, but then I was like, ain't nobody got time for that. As you can see, the engine is leaning back pretty hard, and yeah, even I noticed it. But I kept saying to myself, there's got to be a way around this. I mean, I could just kind of work it as I get it in there. It'll be fine, right? And famous last words, I mean, this thing gave me hell to put this thing in here. Had I known the struggles I was going to go through, I would have just taken the time before to fix it instead of saying, nah, it'll be fine. And here's the point where I realized that the jack stands on the front subframe were just in the way, and I couldn't deal with it no more, so I had to lift up the car and relocate the jack stands. Here's something I didn't notice, but from your guys' perspective, you could see the blue oil filter behind the engine. As I was lowering down the engine, the oil filter came in contact with the proportioning valve. And the more I lowered the engine, it just kept denting in and scratching that filter. It's not a big deal, I could replace it, it's just oil filter, but it sucks when parts start to get damaged. And it all comes down to it being my fault. I should have just fixed the tilting engine when I first noticed the problem. At this point, it just seemed like the engine wasn't gonna fit. It seemed like the bracket for the engine mount on the right side, the one I painted, was in the way, so I just removed that, and in a few minutes I'm gonna remove the mount off of the left side because it seemed like this is the only way it was gonna go in. Now the engine seems like it's falling in place, but I need it to go lower and it won't go any lower. Apparently now the alternator is hitting this front frame right here, like this cradle. So I'm gonna have to go ahead and remove this right now. It sucks because it would have been super easy to remove the engine out of the car, but now I have to deal with it. I have no choice. You guys are probably wondering, wait, how you're removing a subframe? Like, doesn't it need to be there? Well, yes, it does need to be there, but there's an aftermarket subframe which is way smaller than this one, and it's basically gonna replace this big old chunk of metal. So it's not like I'm completely removing it. It just means I have to buy a new part that's going to replace it. With that cradle off of the car, now I have enough space to lower the engine even further and get everything to start to line up where it needs to be. So I got the bolt in on this side, on the left side. As you can see, I'm threading it in right now. And then I could grab my mount, the one I painted, and put it back on the right side. Now, I'm not going to put my hand between an engine that's lifted by a hoist and the frame of the car. That just sounds like a bad idea. So instead, I'm just going to lay this right here in place and let it sit on the frame and put the one bolt in, the one that's on top, where my hand isn't in any of the pinch points. With the weight of the engine on both of the mounts, I could get the hoist out of here. And there we have it. It's official. The K24 is now in the CRX. So this is the first time we get a look at this, and I'm loving it, guys. Now the engine is tilted back a little bit further than it should be because there's another mount that goes behind here. And in just a minute, I'm going to go ahead and install that mount, and we could get a real idea of what angle this engine is going to be sitting at once it's like fully complete. And here goes that rear mount. It only took 15-20 minutes to get everything all settled up and lined up. And you see I'm using old bolts here, and that's because I couldn't find the 2 bolts for this last mount, and it turns out it's the 2 bolts that I put right here in the bell housing to hold the transmission on. So I'm not missing any bolts. I just used 2 of them earlier and I forgot about it. But if we look at the mount on the left side, it's perfectly centered. And if we go look at the mount on the right side, same exact thing. Everything is nice and centered. So this is where the engine is going to sit. It's going to be its final resting place. This is what it's going to look like once it's fully complete. And everything looks great to me. Of course, there's still so much work to do, guys. And for you guys wondering, whoa, that engine looks like it's sticking up pretty high. Yep, that's just how it sits. I'm gonna have to cut a hole in my hood, guys, because look at this. The valve cover and the intake manifold sticks above the hood. There's no way of hiding this. Okay, that's why easiest solution is just to cut a hole in the hood. Anyways, guys, that's gonna be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and like always, thanks for watching.